Welcome everyone to SQL Friday number 35. Our star today is Riccardo Zamana, who is connecting from close to Venice. You can see his city in the background of the camera. Welcome to SQL Fridays, Riccardo, who is going to talk about Redis on the cloud, red pill or blue pill. I'm really excited about
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
Welcome to SQL Friday.
Okay, thank you. Everybody of us, I think, that knows about Redis, but I don't know which is the medium level of knowledge about it. And this is the goal of today. So my session will be a sort of overview with a deep dive in code or deep dive in scripting in some case, in order to give you an explanation about the real meaning of Redis. So first of all, prior to Visual Studio, I would like to share with you some slides. I hope you can see them.
We see the slides.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. So this is a fundamental image because, Redis has got a red color, but in the Microsoft ecosystem, they have blue color. And this is the fundamental meaning of Redis. Redis is what you can find on Azure or is something else. Today we will see the differences and all the facts that are happening on Azure in order to have a sort of unique peel, half red and half blue. So I don't know exactly which is your mention, okay, if you are data engineers, if you are developers or system architects and so on, but in Italy, and I think also not only in Italy, when you think to Redis, you imagine a sort of memcache evolution, so a sort of cache. And it is wrong. It is the worst definition you can say about Redis, because Redis is more than a cache, and it is a sort of data structure system in which you can find also a cache, but you can find many other things. And I would like to tell you a story. When you listen to the word Redis, probably in front of you, you have, in most cases, a developer. You don't have in front of you a data engineer nor a system architect, because Redis is not really a database, okay? Nobody knows exactly how to backup and export, how to scale Redis engine, how can be portable between various systems, how can it can deal with Kubernetes or Docker containers and so on. And it is a sort of commodity used to store keys, and in most of the cases only string keys, in order to speed up some query. Okay. I hope that you are after this vision, because if you have only this vision, I'm sorry, but you are wrong. There are many cases in the edge world and also in the cloud world in which we can find in Redis a unique object to host very plenty of data structures. So brokers based on the topic pattern, queues systems, or streams, or time series databases, or documental NoSQL databases, or graph databases, and so on. Where can be hosted? Oh, everywhere. another bad thing is about documentation, because Redis in the last years, the Redis 4, Redis 5, and now Redis 6, they have different ways to do the same things. So another problem is that the documentation you can find on Google, often you can find wrong documentation or not related to the version you want to use. Okay. For example, do you know that we can develop Redis extensions directly into Redis? So we can coding not in order to use Redis, but in order to expand Redis. To say a metaphor, it is the same factor that happens if you want to extend the SQL Server. Okay, you can use SQL Server, but is not very a daily work to customize. Okay, SQL Server. And the last question we will answer is about management. Because when you talk about Redis, today you have only two possibilities. The first one is that is a development tool, and so every system architect doesn't know which is located, which is the port, which is the security, which is the encryption level, and nobody knows how to configure it. In fact, we can say that the majority of on-premises installation of Redis is done without caring about security, without caring about users, passwords, and so on. And we can manage Redis with a professional level. It is the same level we use when we deal with a normal relational database, such as a SQL Server. Okay. So some note about Redis. Redis, as I said, is a data structure server. So you can have inside Redis many mutable data structure, and you can manage all of them using a unique way. And so a sort of CLI, okay, a sort of command line dedicated to Redis, and with only one client, you can manage the cache part, the queue part, the time series part, and so on. It is based on a simple protocol. So imagine that you have a mono-threaded process, and you can have multiple connections, but all the operations inside Redis are mono-threaded, and you deal directly with the TCP sockets, okay, to tell the truth. And is based on a very complicated use of memory. So it is very, very it is very fast in terms of operation. Okay. For example, you can proudly say that you can have a million of operation without having a sort of imperial cluster, okay? So without having an AKS structured in 20 or 30 nodes and so on. Imagine that a simple, if you are familiar with Azure, if you have an AKS service with one node, okay, so it is not scaled, one node, with the cheapest virtual machines, for example, B2S, okay? So 2 cores, not continuously working, and 4 gigabytes of RAM. And you can perform a Redis benchmark. You can have more or less 60,000 operations per second, okay? And it is only a process without internal scalability, so it is not a replica set, nor pipelines. It is a sort of default configuration with the cheapest machine you can have. 60,000 operations per second. And is written in C, so you don't have to deal with other infrastructures such as Java virtual machine and so on. Proud Italian software, yes, you know Salvatore Sanfilippo. Now Redis is changed because now there is Redis Labs. There is a business company, okay, that can manage the enterprise installations of Redis. But if you see all the evolution about Redis, you can see also many improvements, not only in performance. And let me say that Salvatore is a very, very good programmer in terms of performance, okay? Probably Redis Labs contribution is regarding vision of the product, okay? Not only the code. So you have today 5 main data types. For example, the hyperlog bitmap is very, very commonly used when you have to deal with thousands of thousands in terms of data. And you want to have a statistic response about there is or there isn't a thing into the cache, for example. And inside Redis, you have Lua Script. I know that you are a fan of Lua. Nobody knows about Lua. After we will see some example. And probably nobody of us deals frequently with snapshotting or replication or transaction problems. And Redis, with only one configuration file, can deal with those arguments in an easy way. Redis is useful for many things. In my life, I've used Redis in production many times, not only on Azure, even on on-premise installation. And in order to do what? Oh, let me say, I use Redis as message queue system, because when you have to deal with thousands of queues and are hierarchically positioned queues, you can use Redis better than a classical RabbitMQ system. In another application, I used Redis as a time series database, and if you want, I can share my code in order to have your consideration about that. But in general, Redis can be used in order to have a sort of snapshot of the situation. Imagine, for example, in an IoT situation, so you have a sort of streaming data that comes from IoT Hub, Event Hub, and so on. And all this stream must be enriched in the fastest way with the statical data or data that can change in a sort of toggle way. Okay, imagine it is a sort of prehistorical digital twin of a thing. Okay, imagine that you have a key. Inside the key, you have a structure, hierarchically with a morphology about a real JSON with the section and subsections, and you have to bring some attribute and nest that attribute to the string. Okay, these are the two consistent ways in order to use Redis. So not as a cache. Redis is good in order to search things when the things are not documents, but are documents in terms of JSON documents. Okay. So in order to have a sort of trust in front of Redis, we have to solve something. For example, the first thing that I ate, okay, in the past was the graphical user interface, because there were plenty of graphical user interfaces, but I didn't find one that was stable. Okay, this is what this was, and this probably for you is the first doubt about Redis usage. The second one is the Windows version. And you know, Redis was born for Linux systems, and today is compatible with the subsystem, okay, Windows subsystem Linux, so WSL. But for the majority who can use Redis today, the first way to use it is about using a Docker container, because the Windows version is not updated. And all the other things are regarding management, okay? And today, I'm proud to say that there is an official client. You have the Redis CLI, okay, but you can have another client that is Redis Insight, that is distributed from Redis Labs. And you can have also certifiable knowledge about Redis. And you can use Redis in a bigger place and a very, very small place. My job is regarding IoT in the industrial landscape. And we use Redis in the Edge version, in the IoT Edge version. And dealing with it, you can have from 5 to 8 megabytes of RAM that is involved in order to use Redis, and is a very cheap consumption. I would like to share with you Redis Insight. Sorry for the pages. Redis is a sort of Node.js application, in my opinion. So you can have your installation, okay, you can download it, and then you can start the server. Inside, you can create, in many ways, Redis databases, or you can add local databases. For example, in my case, I linked my local host Redis database based on Docker, and I linked also AKS deployment and Azure Container Instance. Inside of it, you can find out many things. We will talk about these things, so graph, gears, time series, and search. But you can simply navigate all the keys and add keys, or using it in order to simulate a complete Redis CLI. So having only a browser, you can use Redis with the classical way, so the Redis CLI, or in the browser way. And you can use more than Redis. For example, I activated these modules. In order to come back, I don't know which is exactly your level of knowledge about Redis. Imagine that we have pre-built data structure in Redis. We have many of them. And if you see there are something strange in this imagine, this is an old image. It was about the 5.0 version. And if you see, we can find streams rather than hyperlog, okay? But streams, it is a sort of news about Redis. But we will talk about that in a few minutes. In order to have knowledge about Redis, you can certify yourself. The certification is very cheap, so less than the standard price when you deal with the Microsoft certification, standard certification. The proctoring system is the same, and you can plan every month. You can schedule in some day your exam, and the training is free, completely free. So I will share with you my slides, and you can find all these links. These are important news about. Sorry for the slides. The current version is the 6.0.10 today. But in my opinion, the current version that is quietly stable is the 8th version. And this is an important slide because you can say that we can say that there is a sort of deep difference, because what you can find on the market, for example, Azure version, is still 4. We have the preview from some week about the 6th version. They jumped totally to 5. I don't know why. But there is an amount of new features that are only in the 6th version. The Windows version is 5, the natively Windows installer. So there is about a bit of confusion about which is the real version that I have to use in order to work. In my humble opinion, I can say that there is the 6th version. Okay, the version 6 is a complete version about all the capabilities in Redis. Rather than in production, we can buy the Enterprise Pro version. To tell the truth, is not very cheap. I can't say you exactly, okay, but imagine that I deal with I have more than one deal with the Redis Labs, and I know which are the strategy about pricing. I can say that you have to speak with them in order to go deeper in which are your requirements in terms of nodes, in terms of core per nodes, and in terms of operation per second. And then you can have a complete vision about which is the best hardware and which is the license. This discussion is about the on-premise world. I don't have experience in the cloud PaaS world that you can find in the marketplace. Okay. And about the Enterprise Pro, which are the differences? Okay, imagine that you have Redis, and we said that Redis works in memory. And when you have to when you deal with thousands of information, probably you have to configure a VM, okay, with many gigabytes of RAM. You can persist on disk, but you can query only in the RAM. Okay, this for the open source version. When you deal with the Enterprise Pro, you can query in the flash or the SSD memory also. So imagine that you have a normal usage of Redis, so a sort of hot path place in order to store last infos, okay, of data, or a place in order to store all the current information about your user, or current information about your website sessions. Okay, you can use, in my opinion, the open source version of Redis, well configured in order to be resilient, but the amount of RAM is not so high. If you had to process with aggregations, with time series aggregation inside Redis, a sort of circular buffer about 72 hours of IoT data that comes from devices sampled in speaking about Earth, so fractions of seconds, probably the amount of RAM is very, very high. And so it is better to choose, okay, the enterprise version in order to use SSD. Data types, in order to go faster. String. I would like to say we use Redis string, which more or less this amount of characters. But is wrong, because in every key we can store half a gigabyte. Okay. The most beautiful use of Redis in terms of string keys is locking, because I make you an example. Imagine that you have resources, okay, APIs, data, Windows, or other things, and you want that your data can be used only from one user, and so you reserve a fraction of time for one user. And you can, for example, store the session. Okay, so first of all, the user asks for the resource. The software store a sort of lock, okay, as a string key that says that that user is the only unique user that can use some resource. So the value is the profile of the user. And you enable a sort of time to live about that key. And so you can use it, a sort of semaphore, in order to not permit to other, in order to go to that resource. So other users can ask for the same resource only when the TTL will delete the key. Okay. And for example, you can use Redis string in another way in order to store images. Make you an example in my word. Imagine a video camera that can make a quality control about defects, okay, and store two things for every piece that is analyzed using the video camera. And so in Redis you can store the image as a sort of binary and the JSON with the outcome of an inference API, in which you can find a sort of a JSON array with position, X and Y coordinates, in order to find out where is located the defect. Okay, you can store on Redis, and so using Redis, you can do your quality check without thinking about the operation in terms of I/O in the disks, and store all the images into Redis, seen as a sort of temporal buffer, that can deal with serialization on disk independently from you. Okay. List. You can use list to store queues, to store circular buffers. Okay, for example, in the industrial world, we use this kind of data type in order to store the last samples, for example, the last 100 samples of every process variable in a machine. And every time you put another, so every time you make the command lpush, left push, in the same transaction, you can make the right pop in order to bring out of the queue the anciest word, the anciest value, and maintaining updated all the queue. But when you want to visualize all the temporal queue, you can bring it with a get. Okay. And so the rotation is simple, and is simple the visualization of the entire queue with only one instruction. Probably in the daily use, this is a sort of data type that is not being used many times. But if you want to have a better performance, instead of serialize a string, a JSON as a string, you can, and you don't deal with too many complicated JSONs. Okay, you can use hashes. So a sort of key with a set of value pairs. And this is important if you think about relationship. So in order to manage Redis with, for example, collections, okay, that are a sort of plain table of things, and make a relationship in an efficient way, you can use hashes in order to store. It is a sort of relationship table in order to store foreign keys. Okay. Probably someone of you is thinking about performance in this use case, and if you're thinking about that, you are in the good way to use Redis. Performance about this usage. You know that the round trips in front of a data source or data store, okay, are important in terms of number. And the most brilliant way to limit the number of round trip when you have to join a data structure with another data structure in Redis is using Lua scripts. Okay, this is the concrete role of Lua. When you have too many round trips, in order to aggregate information that are stored inside Redis, but in different positions. And so in order to launch commands in front of Redis and inside the Redis memory, brings all the leaves of your trees, okay, and make a new tree, okay, aggregating all the information. You can use lists, you can use hashes, and you can merge them together using the same commands you can use from the development side, okay, but inside Redis using Lua. This is the meaning of Lua. Okay, I hope that this concept is clear to you now, because in every session I make about Redis, every developer make a strange face when I speak about Lua and says that it is not a common language, why we have to divide all the code in C# and Lua, and so on. Lua, it is a sort of enhancer in terms of performance and a diminisher in terms of round trips when you have to merge entities that are stored in different positions into Redis. And there are many tutorials online about that. Set is simple, okay? But it is important to understand the difference between set and sorted set. This is an ordered. This is ordered. But in the unordered, you can have duplicates. You can't have duplicates in the ordered. For example, if I have another property with the same value, in your mind, you say, okay, I will have two keys with the same value. No, the second one is overwritten cause of the second. Yes, this is bad, and this is why they invented other data structures, such as, for example, time series. In order to go faster, this is important. Redis, when you have to deal with point of interest, so telemetry about cars and so on, you can use it because it is cheap on Azure. You know, geospatial indexes, you can find them in Cosmos, for example. You can find them on ADX, for example, but there are not so cheap data structures. Redis, you can buy one Redis, and inside that Redis, you can use even this kind of index. Another important use of Redis is a sort of fan-out object in order to distribute things. On Azure, there is a very pretty service that is Event Grid, that is based on the fan-out architecture. And you can use the same Redis, even on-prem, even on cloud, with this meaning. In order to taking you to the next level, I would like to introduce you, for example, the limitation about PubSub. Okay, so follow me with the numbers. I put these images in order to be quicker. Okay, I go to the Redis server. I publish on channel 1 this string. Okay. I subscribe to the channel. I don't receive nothing. After that, I subscribe to the same channel with another client. I receive nothing. Then I publish, and every subscription can take the publish, and so on. So the problem is that there is no policy for new subscribers. So it's not reliable, the subpub. This is one limitation, but there are other limitations regarding usage of the standard types. So someone, probably Salvatore, introduced the capability of extend the Redis using modules. Let me say that this is the good starting point if you want to build up your own module. All the modules are Redis 4 compatible, but when you plug in one of them, probably you have to deal with IaaS, infrastructure as a service installation, or container-based installations. There is, in particular, there is one, distribution that you can find on Docker Hub. There is many confusion about Redis when you write down Redis, okay? Look at this. Redis Search is a module. Redis Insight is only the client, you know. JSON is another module. Redis Graph is another module. And the question is there a completely ready installation of Redis with all the latest modules? Yes, there is. And there is the Redis mod distribution. And you can pull it simply, and you can have all the modules already activated. So Redis AI, Redis Search, and so on. Okay. But in the ecosystem, there are many modules. And this is why, in my opinion, Redis could be your Swiss knife in most of the cases. When you don't know exactly which is the dimension, which is the impact that in the future you will have about data progressions, okay? So when you have to deal with small but fast projects, my advice is to use Redis instead of lose time thinking about influx usage, yes or no, I don't know. Neo4j integration with .NET, for example, or MongoDB or other technologies. In my opinion, it is more faster to introduce a single object that is ready in half a second, use a simple Docker container, and with it, you can start developing wrappers. And after that, you can substitute your backend with other more structured, if needed, okay, if needed, more structured objects. If you don't do that, probably you will lose someday in order to decide and in order to start up all the things and in order to configure your project in Visual Studio and in order to start up all the coding, okay, thinking to the data structures, thinking to the simplify your life, developers, simplified, okay? Life is very complicated without the development. So simplify the development using at the starting point one simple object, okay? Talking about Redis Stream. Redis Stream is like Kafka, okay? If I say Kafka, if I say Event Hub, something like that, Redis Stream is the relative object about that. Don't be angry with Redis because of the command usage. You know, code is simpler, but imagine that the drivers you can have online, Stack Exchange and so on, are simply wrappers about CLI, nothing else. And so you can write down your module or your client or your SDK. Why not? And in order to go, okay, I can show you an example. I will share with you this simple code. It is a sort of mini encyclopedia of how to use without reading on Google, okay, all the major data structures, and you can start from here and then evolve your infrastructure. For example, in this case, what I've done, I've done a simple structure. So with an application settings, okay, with one parameter Redis connection, very, very simple. And then I wrapped all the infrastructure with a static object, Redis store. And I use it in order to test all the modules. For example, streams, okay? Is complicated to store events into? No, absolutely. You have to deal with name value entry object and name value pair, and then stream add, nothing else. What is the difficult? Is difficult to read from? No, stream read. And you can say the position, and the position is a sort of offset in the stream. It is the same offset you can find of Kafka or in other similar objects, Pulsar and so on. And after that, you can consume, so you can read, but read does not imply a sort of checkpoint in the time. If you wanted to read in a consistent way from the ancientest to the newest object in your stream, you have to consume object. And so you can have the same, the same concept that you can find on Kafka. So you can have consumer groups. The consumer groups, you can create and delete them. When you create them, one of them, you can say which is the point in time you want to start, okay, to consume. And then you can start consuming. And you can have also informations about all the pending streaming for every single consumer group. For example, the message count, the lowest, the highest, and so on. And in this way, you can navigate, you can roll back your navigation, you can start from some important point in the time. And so you can use in the simplest way, in a simpler way, all the Redis stream. Instead of, thinking about to integrate drivers, instead of thinking about complicated stacks when you have to deal with time and a faster way to build up POCs or build up software that are customer-centric, for example, not architecture-centric. Another important thing, Redis JSON. Redis JSON. How many of you deals with MongoDB or Cosmos DB for few JSONs, few lines of code, few objects that must be stored into a documental database? And you can do that using the same object. So you can do that using tree data structure. My advice is not to have a very, very complicated data structure in terms of trees, But typically, when you have to deal with 2 or 3 level of JSONs, and you have to deal with less than 1 gigabyte of JSON that must be readable in half a milliseconds, probably you have to deal with this object and no more with SQLite, SQL Server, or MongoDB, and so on, Because they are expensive in terms of RAM, in terms of disk. For what? For few things. Use Redis. In order to go over, yeah, I would like to say that there are some changes that are happening right now, because probably in order to give more efficiency in this kind of Redis, okay, let me say, probably we have to wait some time, but it is only related to very, very complicated JSONs. So more than 3 level, okay, of hierarchy inside the JSON documents. For example, in order to view all the performances, I've tested the raw JSON in order to understand which are the differences. So the first way I tested was raw JSON string keys. So why I have to use Redis JSON? And yeah, you know, the disadvantages are simples. The first of all is elements are not accessible. And so you have to have the entire object, serialize it, change it, and store back. Not efficient. Too many lines of code. I changed my approach with the classical one. So let Lua do for you all the parsing. And the problem, yeah, in this way is not efficient because I use Lua in order to do the same work I would like to do in C#. And so I have introduced a sort of duplicate of code workplace. Not very good approach. And decouple all the JSON into hashes, yes, but it's up to you in all the, as I said, all the reconjunction phase, so the joining. And after that, I tested the re-JSON, so Redis JSON. Very useful, but very high memory. These are the results. And even if you have to deal with probably a little scale-up instance of Redis, this is the best way to do that. After that, we can talk about Redis time series. And this is very important because in the past, there were many mistakes about the usage of Redis using sorted sets in time series contexts. So there was a problem, and the problem was that if you use a sorted set, you can use a sorted set as a sort of series, okay? And the time is the member, okay, and the score is the result. Sounds good, but if in the time you have two values, equal values in two different moments, the second value, that is equal to the first, okay, is not duplicating your series, but is there is a sort of implicit update of the first timestamp. So the trick was to append a sort of guide after the score with a character in order to separate which was the right value and which was the guide. Not very useful, but good in terms of ingestion, bad, very bad in terms of searching. I skipped this slide, but my advice is to understand how is made a Redis time series. So it is a sort of a very, very efficient linked list. And the Redis time series has got the very basic commands in order to manage the series, and in order to alter the series. Changing what? Changing the metadata. The metadata is very important when you deal with the time series, in order to have natively ready windows of data. So bring data with a certain tag, for example, product ID in my case, or in order to search data that is hierarchically related to other. So if you want to, let me say, an hash table with the machines that are in Fabric, and choose the data in the time series section of your data structure, using tag with the machine ID, the plant ID, and so on. I would like to, prior to talking about Redis on Azure, let me demonstrate you some line of code in order to say wow, in this sample. I do simple things. For example, I create a serial, and then I fill it, and then I tag it, and after that I take a range into it. But keep attention, I can downsample in a new time series tuple list all the data that comes from that I can find in the first one. So I have filled a time series range, and then I can say, using Redis, nor other instruments, no other tools, please aggregate all the data with this time bucket and makes a new tuple list. This tuple can be a one-shot, one value tuple, or a real series. For example, you can use Redis to project your data. So even if it's more convenient to materialize data into a data warehouse and so on, if you have to deal with the quick aggregations without having Python, Databricks, and other objects, you can do that using simple time series objects within Redis. And the very, very impressive way is that you can add dynamically a rule that say, when we will apply this rule to another series, this rule says, please take all the values in the first series and dynamically, so during the ingestion process, activate a new series with this kind of aggregation and with this time bucket. So from that moment, you can add new values to other series. So you can fill in parallel many series, many time series. So you can ingest simply all the data that comes from the machines, and in real time, other series are creating and can give you an updated visualization, but is more convenient from the amount of throughput, for example. And so you can bring data using 1 second sampling and read data in another time series using, for example, a minute interpolated data. And this is very, very useful from my point of view. On, let me say, please 3 to 5 minutes more, okay? This part is very simple. Redis on Azure. In order to use Redis, have I to install Redis? No. You can use a simple npm package. So it is a sort of very, very light CLI and 2 lines of code, and you can have your CLI, complete CLI. You can you must be familiar with some command, so ping in order to say are you alive or not. Latency, presence of big keys. This is very, very important. Okay, in order to have a balanced data structure. You can benchmark when you are inside the Redis server. You can benchmark data structures, or if you pull out this option, you can benchmark all the data structures with what? With a simulation of amount of requests and amount of pipelines. So parallelism is common in benchmarking. Let me say that when you use Redis, first of all, please benchmark your target environment in order to be able to understand if your code and your usage is balanced only using C#. If you deal with performance issues, start thinking to aggregate data using Lua. This is my advice. Okay, so first of all, use your familiar language. But if the target place is not so performant as your laptop, give it a look firstly, and act reducing the amount of external round trips and deal with Lua in order to make aggregations into Redis. You can have Redis in 3 different ways. The most familiar is Azure Cache for Redis. This is a news. Yoo-hoo, we have the 6th preview. Probably in 2025 they will put in GA. I'm joking, obviously. I hope that they will put in GA this year. I don't know. And I suggest you to consider the other two ways because of the simplicity. It's true that this is the most simplest, but trust me that you can have which less costs replicated AKS cluster. And I would like to, I don't know if there is a, oh, sorry, I lose the page, but you can use Azure pricing. Oh no, okay, this is, for example, a month of seconds with an Azure container instance. So 2 CPUs, this is the equivalent of D2 machine, $70. Sorry, an F machine, not D. Yeah, F2S. Pay as you go, 90. Okay, 3-year reserve, 37. If you make the reservation of Redis, it's not possible. You have to deal with premium, and so it is much higher. But in terms of memory, so in terms of RAM memory, okay, this is more expensive. This is the most expensive, even if it's the PaaS. So it's more convenient to have a sort of container-based installation in order to have, first of all, a replicated installation. So with a primary and a replica. And if you will see my slides, you will find these instructions. Okay, so you can launch your AKS with this fast tutorial. Simply changes these values, subscription, resource group, and name. And after that, with these simple scripts, okay, you can have a replicated cluster with less than $1,000 per month. And you can check this with the Redis CLI or the RDS CLI if you use the Node.js one. And you can have your complete Redis replicated cluster in the fastest way and in the multi-cloud way, okay, using the base Docker that with all the modules activated, nothing else. Very, very simple. The most simple way is to use this. So one, you can do your AZ login, AZ account set with your subscription, and then you can create your for development use your Azure Container instance of Redis, and with this instruction you can persist your Redis using a storage account. So previously you have a storage, you have to install a storage account. After that, you can create Redis. I'm sorry, the time is running out, and so I say thank you. Please join a more flexible mindset using Redis with all its capabilities. And you can start with the other more complicated infrastructures after the first development phase. And so approach software in the iterative way, use small objects with many meanings, and after that you can structure a more enterprise-ready solution. Or you can buy Redis Enterprise and maintain your beautiful Redis. Thank you for your thank you for the attention. From my opinion, I would like to have answers about your opinion, okay, about Redis, and I hope you can use Redis in the right way. Thank you, Magnus, for your time.
Thank you for coming to SQL Friday. I saw the Twitter handle and so on, and they're also on the meetup. And when I upload the video, I will include it in the page. So anyone watching either now live or later in the video, you see the contact details already on the SQLFriday.net page. So you can contact Riccardo if you have further questions about the presentation, or I guess you're probably happy to talk about Redis on Twitter, even if it's outside of the presentation. So.
Yeah, it would do.
So thank you so much. It's I never used Redis myself. It's sorry about that, but I see some use cases, so it's definitely worth looking into. Okay. And as you said in the beginning, I think of all the people I've talked to, they see Redis, oh, that's a cache solution.
Yeah, no, wrong. Yeah. Very wrong affirmation. Yeah. It's more than that, okay?
Yeah.
More than that.
But very interesting and packed with information. Do you have the slide deck uploaded somewhere?
Yeah, I can give a copy on my personal GitHub, or if you want, I can send you using a simple email, and then you can share with all the community. There are no problem for me.
If you would, if you can just email me a link to the GitHub, then I can include it on the page when the video is up. So
okay, I will do.
I saw there was some more information that we had to skip through because of time constraints. So
yeah,
probably useful to browse through.
Yes, probably.
So I'm off for the next appointment I have, but thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you back sometime in the future.
Okay, thank you, Magnus. Bye. Bye, everybody. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.